Hello everyone and welcome to this program about the NDB approach. As you can see, we're currently at flight level 180. We're coming from Jersey, we're going into Birmingham and we're planning to do the NDB approach onto runway 15. Thought I'd start the video fairly early on so we could explain some of the features and expectations of the NDB approach. The NDB approach is usually the most difficult form of instrument approach in real life because the NDB is notoriously inaccurate and difficult to use. That makes things quite hard, and it's also subject to a lot of interference and various effects that make it less than accurate. The NDB is a very old-fashioned form of approach, and today's airlines tend to prefer to use RNAV approach. In fact, all instruments pilots tend to use RNAV, FMS, GPS approaches, as they're more accurate and they're much more easy to use. However, you still have to know how to perform an NDB approach, and you may be required to do so. So this video will have a look at how it's done. If you have a look at the NDB procedure for runway 15, you can see that we have a hold at the Bravo Hotel X-Ray, which is the NDB on the airfield, which has a 327 degree outbound radial, 147 degree inbound radial, with a right hand turn, and it's a standard 1 minute hold with a lowest holding altitude of 2,500 feet. It's standard procedure when there's no radar guidance available and you're entering instrument approach procedure. To enter the hold first of all. As you can see, and as you'll know from our discussion of holds in the last few videos, it's likely coming from the southeast that we're going to require a teardrop entry into the hold. So we'll go once round the hold, and we can do that using the FMS. And you can see then, using the notes at the bottom, aircraft commencing from the NDB holding pattern, make a 1 nautical mile procedure turn left, and as you can see that's on a track of 107 degrees, to establish on the appropriate outbound QDR. So once we go once round the hold, when we get back to the Bravo Hotel X-Ray, we're going to turn onto a track of 107 degrees for 1 minute, and then turn right to establish on the outbound QDR, and for this approach you can see it's 318 degrees. We'll be using the ILS DME, which I'll select on nav2, 110.1, the India Bravo India Romeo. We'll identify all of these navigation aids, of course, before we use them. And we'll continue on the outbound leg 318 degrees until we get to 9 DME on the ILS, at which point we'll turn right to intercept the 152 degree inbound radial for the approach, or rather the inbound QDR for the approach. And at that point we should be at 2,500 feet. So we'll fly the hold at 2,500 and the outbound QDR, and we'll be established on the final approach at 2,500 feet, which as you can see is the platform altitude. The final approach point is at 6.7 DME, and at that point then we'll descend, and estimating at the moment an approach speed of 120 knots, it's looking to be about 600-650 feet per minute. We'll regulate that using the vertical speed wheel on the flight guidance control panel, and we'll descend to the decision altitude of 770 feet. If we need to perform a missed approach, and it says we simply climb straight ahead to 1,000 feet and then right onto track 167 degrees to 3,000 feet. Now, as it happens, there is actually air traffic control online at VATSIM, and I am flying on VATSIM at the moment, so I have informed him that we'll be performing the NDB approach for filming purposes. Nevertheless, without radar guidance, you would normally enter the hold first of all before commencing the arrival procedure. If you have a look at the standard NDB approach profile, which I've created and put on the Flybe virtual website in the training section for those of you who are in the virtual airline. For those of you who are not, you can see it here. This is the standard profile for the NDB approach. So on the outbound QDR we want to be 170 knots, flap 5 with 8 to 50 RPM set. And the entire procedure will be flown in heading mode. There is such thing as an FMS overlay approach, and we may look at that in another video, but for the moment we'll be flying the entire approach in heading mode. As we turn right at the 9 mile point on the outbound QDR, to establish on the 152 inbound QDR to the NDB. Once we get to 3 miles from our final approach point, which as you can see, and as we've discussed, is 6.7 DME. So at 9.7 DME we're going to have gear down, flap 15, reduced MP, and seeing as we have nice long runway and favourable conditions at Birmingham today, we'll use the reduced MP option. Condition levers to max, and then complete the landing checklist. At 1 mile from the top of descent, so at 7.7 DME, we're going to select VS plus 0 on the flight guidance control panel. And at 0.5 DME, so 7.2 DME, we'll set the missed approach altitude of 3,000 feet. We can also set flap 35 at this point, but we're not going to be using that as we have nice long runway into Birmingham, no need for flaps 35 to be used. At 0.2 DME, so 6.9 DME, we'll then start our descent, select the appropriate vertical speed, which would be around 600 feet per minute, thereabouts. Down to our decision altitude. Once we're at our decision altitude, we need to make sure that we are visual with the airfield, and then disconnect the autopilot and manoeuvre the aircraft manually onto final approach. Now, because of the weather conditions we're expecting at Birmingham, I expect that we will be visual with the airfield well in excess of the decision altitude. But in case that's not the case, the decision altitude will be 770 feet. You'll notice in the notes that the final approach track is offset by 5 degrees from the runway centreline, and this is very common for a lot of non-precision approaches. And you'll see that the final approach track then intercepts the runway centreline at 0.8 DME before the threshold, which is very low indeed. So if you're performing the NDB approach as a cloud braking procedure, just as a way of getting down on instruments below the cloud before becoming visual and manoeuvring the aircraft manually, don't be surprised to find the aircraft quite a way offset from the centreline. You will of course have to manoeuvre the aeroplane onto the centreline, and our aim is to be stable by 500 feet above aerodrome level. So 500 feet radio altitude is our minimum stable point. If we're not stable at that point, so if we're not on the centre line, speeds aren't good, flaps and gear are down, and the airplane perfectly stable for the approach and landing by 500 feet, then we have to perform the missed approach. So let's prepare for our descent. We've got our charts ready. The decision altitude for the approach is 770 feet, which I have set. And the weather at Birmingham is Alright, actually, 210 degrees at 9 knots, varying between 170 and 250, visibility greater than 10 kilometers, scattered cloud at 3,300 feet, temperature 17, dew point 9, and a QNH of 1011, so we'll preset that on the standby altimeter. Elevation of 325 feet, we've got that roughly set on the landing altitude gauge. Gives us a VREF of 119. And a VClimb of 146, which should be set on both sides. Next we're going to have a look and work out our top of descent, which is coming fairly close, I would say. There are no actual altitude restrictions on the arrival, so we're going to set the procedure so that we're flight level 70 by Honolulu. So we've now set the top of descent point, and you can see that that's going to be about a sensible descent point. We're going to be landing with flap 15, which is set on the GPWS landing flap. And we're now going to set the radio aids. VHX is 406. Make sure that that's set on my HSI so we can see it. And we're also going to be using the ILS DME. And I'm going to... So there we go, we've identified the ADF, that is the correct code for Bravo Hotel X-Ray. So you can see that the BHX is now identified for our approach. Next thing I'm going to do is define our holding. So Bravo Hotel X-Ray isn't actually on the routing, so we're going to select it manually. It's an inbound of 147 degrees, outbound 327, right hand turn, and a standard 1 minute hold. We've been cleared to descend now to flight level 80. So slightly above our calculated top of descent point. So I'm just going to make a shallow rate of descent at the moment. And I'm also going to start bringing the speed back. So reducing the speed. Keeping the aircraft trimmed. We can carry out the descent checklist at this stage. So the pressurization has been set. GPWS flat position is at 15, which is correct. Safety and transition altitudes we haven't yet discussed. Transition altitude 6,000 feet, level will be as per air traffic control. And the safety altitude, as you can see, worst case 2,500 feet within 25 miles of the Bravo Hotel X-Ray NDB. So we'll use that as our safety altitude for the NDB procedure and our initial arrival. And the briefing and bugs have been reviewed and set. Just finally as well, discussion of the fuel as we descend. We've got about just under 1.5 tons on board at the moment, which is a little bit, it's about exactly what we were expecting at this point. By the time we get to Birmingham we should have about 1.2. I've added the extra fuel because of the full NDB procedure, which does take quite a lot of fuel, as it takes quite a lot of time. We're scheduled to land actually at 5:0, so we're going to be a bit late because of the NDB procedure, but not to worry. So by the time we get to Birmingham, the holding procedure should burn, well, we're looking somewhere in the region of an extra 300. So we'll still have an extra 10 or 15 minutes holding capability once we get to Birmingham, and then subsequent diversion to East Midlands, where the weather is perfectly fine, no towns have been checked, and as I say, weather situation is very similar to Birmingham, so we're well within limits. And we've now been cleared to descend to 4,000 feet. QNH is 1011. Cross-checked on both sides. Fuel pumps, auto-feather, and the standby hide and PTU controls can go on. And we've now been cleared direct to the NDB Bravo Hotel X-Ray. So we'll now arm the hold and then select the direct to function. We're going to enter the hold. And we can now carry out the approach checklist. Altimeters, QNH 1011 set, fuel pumps on, standby hide PTU control on, hydraulics are checked, passenger signs can be selected on at this stage, and the cabin is secure. So that's the approach checklist complete. So we're about to enter the hold. Hopefully the aircraft will be performing a teardrop entry, as we discussed, and as it says in the FMS holding page. The radio altimeter is live, and as you can see, conditions outside very nice, very good visibility, so we're in VMC conditions really, but obviously for demonstration purposes I'll continue with the full NDB hold and procedure. So I'm going to pre-select the 107 degree outbound track on the heading bug, and we may have to adjust that slightly for the winds. As you can see, it's not too windy outside today. We've got a 15 knots wind from, where's it from, the southwest. So not too bad. We've been around the hold now, and we're just about to approach the Bravo Hotel X-Ray once again, and at that stage we're going to enter into heading select to join our outbound track of 107 degrees for 1 minute. So there we go over the hole now, and we're going to start our 170 degree outbound turn and start the stopwatch for 1 minute. And now the 1 minute's up, we start our turn to intercept the 318 degree, outbound QDR from the NDB. So we're going to fly towards the NDB initially. So now we're established on the outbound QDR, we can set flap 5, so speed checks, flap 5. We start our inbound turn onto the 152 degree final approach track at 9 miles on the ILS DME. So there's our 9 DME point. I'm going to start reducing speed to our approach speed, which will keep it at 125 knots. So that's the 9.7 DME, selecting gear down, flap 15. At 7.7 DME, we set VS0, and the missed approach altitude, which is 3,000 feet. And there's the descent point, so we're going to start our descent at 700 feet per minute initially. And the landing checklist, landing gear is down 3 greens, condition levers max, bleeds min, flaps 15 set. So 5 miles, we're looking for 1960. can see just a tiny little bit high. Four miles, we're looking for 1640 feet. Just using the vertical speed control to adjust the rate of descent as necessary. So 4 miles, you can see we're now exactly 1640, which is perfect. And now that I'm visual, we have good visual contact, I am going to disengage the autopilot. And then visually manoeuvre the aircraft onto final approach. Not forgetting our stable point, so hopefully we should be stabilised on the centre line.
1,000
by 500 feet radio altitude. Have a bit of a crosswind component as we discussed. Stable. Little bit gusty, as you can see. Crab down the approach. And then correct once we're above the threshold.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
And there we go. Welcome to Birmingham. So just finally, so you can picture what exactly we did. We flew initially to the Bravo Hotel X-Ray NDB from the southeast. We then performed a teardrop entry into the hold, or rather the FMS did it for us in this case. We then flew the hold once, and once we'd flown the hold, we then, once overhead the Bravo Hotel X-Ray, turned left onto a track of 107 degrees for 1 minute. We then turned right to establish on a 318 degree inbound initially to the beacon, and then the outbound QDR for the approach. And at 9 DME we then started our turn on to final of 152 degrees. And then descended as per the published descent trajectory. So that's it, folks. I hope that's been useful. If you have any questions, do feel free to ask me in the forum if you're a member of the virtual airline, or just ask in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everyone.